Hey guys, Miss Barbara here for the final lesson in solving right triangles of right triangle trig in chapter 8 of geometry. So far we have learned how to find side lengths of right triangles using trig given an angle. But what if we want to find an angle instead? Well, in order to find an angle, you need to know two side lengths. Or if you're given one side length and one acute angle, you can find the other sides and the other angles because we know all three angles have to add to 180 in a triangle. So first let's talk about how to find an angle. We're going to use inverse trig ratios. So to find the inverse trig ratios, again, this is very important that you know you're finding an angle using inverse. So before we learned that the sine of A was equal to A over C. So the angle was A, the side ratio was A over C because A is my reference angle, opposite would be A, hypotenuse would be C. Well, now if I want to find the angle, you are going to switch the angle with the side ratio, and you're going to write it as the inverse sign. So the inverse sign of the side ratio is going to give you your angle A. So the cosine of A, which is B over C, adjacent over hypotenuse, again, you switch them. Then B over C now goes in there with the inverse cosine, and you get A. You could also use tangent. Again, you have angle A. Tangent of the A equals your side ratio of opposite over adjacent. You can switch them and put in tangent inverse. That's what that -1 means. It means inverse. And you get A over B equals the measure of angle A. So let's do some examples and you'll see how to find it in your calculator. So use a calculator to approximate the measure of angle P. So here's angle P. That's what I'm trying to find. I'm going to use that as my reference angle to label my sides just like before. They did not tell me the hypotenuse, but I know 9 is opposite angle P and 4 is adjacent. Well, opposite and adjacent, that's tangent. So I can say the tangent of P, because I don't know what P is, so I'll just call it P. Usually we write the degree in there, but we don't know what it is equal to opposite, which is 9, over adjacent, which is 4. Well, now I want to find out what P is. So I'm going to write the tangent inverse of 9 over 4, so you switch them, and that'll give me what angle P is. Now, on your calculator to do that, instead of just typing or pressing the tan button, you'll see above TAN is TAN to the -1. So to get that button, you're going to press Shift and then tangent, and then you're going to type in the fraction, which in this case is 9 divided by 4. Then press Enter, and it says round to the nearest tenth of a degree. Well, 66.03, we'll just round to 66.0. So angle P is about 66.0 degrees. So letter B, here's P. Label the sides. 14 is opposite and 50 is hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse, that's sine. So I can say the sine of angle P is equal to opposite, which is 14, over hypotenuse, which is 50. I want to find out what P is, so I'm going to do the sine inverse. When you're finding an angle, you do the inverse of the ratio. That'll give you angle P. So now in your calculator, we want to use the sine to the -1. So you're going to press Shift or second sine, which is inverse sine, and then type in your fraction 14 divided by 50. Oops, I added an extra parenthesis there, so let me just clear this out. Shift sine, and then 14 divided by 50. Oops, typed it in wrong again. There we go. And I'm getting 16.26, which is 16.3 degrees. Angle P in this case is right there. 12 will be opposite and 20 will be adjacent, so I'm going to use tangent. So the tangent of P will be equal to 12 over 20. So we have to use the inverse tangent to find the angle. So I'm going to do 12 over 20 inverse tan. And then in your calculator, press shift, tangent, 12 divided by 20. Press enter. You're going to get 30.96, which rounds to 31. So go ahead, try letter D on your own, and when you do, you should get P is about 74.2 degrees. But again, try it on your own. Don't trust me. You need to know how to do this for yourself. Example 2 is quite nice because now all you have to do is, using a calculator, find the measure of angle A to the nearest tenth of a degree. We're used to normally seeing side ratios written as ratios, as in fractions, but here they're written as a decimal. But it's no different of a process. I'm just going to do the sine inverse of 0.95 and put that in the calculator in order to find angle A. So I can press shift sine to get the sine inverse, 0.95, and I'm going to get 71.8 degrees. Do the same thing for letter C. I want to find out what A is, so I have to do the inverse cosine of 0.12. Again, we're not used to seeing it as a fraction, but we can do it as a decimal and put that in the calculator. So shift cosine or second cosine, and then 0.12, and you're going to get 83.1. So that's all I'm going to do of these types of problems. You're more than welcome to continue out and just practice putting it in your calculator. But again, you're just going to press shift cos or shift sine, tangent, cosine, depending, and then type in the decimal to find the angle. Lastly, solving right triangles. So when I ask you to solve a right triangle, I mean find every part of the right triangle. Well, triangles have 6 parts. They have 3 sides and 3 angles. They're always going to give you always the right angle, and then they either have to give you 2 other pieces of information, so either 2 sides or an angle and a side. In letter A, they gave me an angle and a side, so I have to find the other angle and the other 2 sides. Well, angle C is pretty darn easy to find because angle C is just going to be 90 minus angle A. All 3 angles have to add to 180. This one's already 90, angle B is already 90. So angle C would just be 90 minus 61, which is 29 degrees. So that would be angle C. Now I know all my angles. I have to find my other 2 sides. I'm going to call BCX and ACY. You don't have to call them this. I just think it's easier to give them variables. I always want to use the angle they gave me as my reference angle just in case I made a mistake. If you use 29 but you got 29 wrong, then every question would be wrong. So use the angle they gave you. X is opposite, 21 is adjacent, and Y is hypotenuse. I can only solve for one variable at a time, so I'm going to solve for X first. Well, I have to use 21. That's the only other side I know. So opposite and adjacent, that's tangent. So to solve for X, I'm going to say the tangent of 61 equals X over 21, opposite over adjacent. Multiplying both sides by 21, I'm going to get X is 37.9. And BC is X. So BC, the side BC is 37.9 degrees. Or 9, not degrees, it's a side. To solve for Y, I have to use 21 again because that's the only side I really know. So I'm going to use adjacent and hypotenuse, which is cosine. So I'm going to say the cosine of 61 equals adjacent, which is 21, over hypotenuse, which was y. Y is in my denominator, so remember you switch and divide. So in your calculator, you're going to do 21 divided by cosine 61. And for that case, you would get y is 43.3. And that's the same thing as AC. So we should be specific as what our x and y is. That was AC, so 43.3. So here are the three other pieces of information they did not give you: angle C, BC, and AC. So that's how you do it if you were given only one angle and one side. Again, you're always given the 90. Letter B here is a little different. They told you angle G is 90, that's always the case, but now they gave you two sides and you need to find the third. The third side is the hypotenuse FH. So I'm going to call it C for hypotenuse, because usually we use C. Well, we don't actually need to use trig at all here. Remember Pythagorean theorem. I can say, I'll call these A and B, and I can say 8.2 squared plus 4 squared equals C squared, FH. Combining on the left here, I'm going to get 83.24 equals C squared. So to find C, I square root both sides, and I get 9.12. Again, I should be specific, that's FH. So FH is 9.12. Now, I have to find my other two angles. Remember, to find angles, we have to use inverse trig. It doesn't matter which angle you want to find first. I'll find H first. Like I said before, always only use the sides that they gave you in case you made a mistake. So I'm not going to use FH in my equation to find angle H. But angle H, you use inverse trig. Well, 8.2 is opposite to angle H, and 4 is adjacent. Opposite over adjacent, that is tangent. So I'm going to use the tangent of angle H equals opposite, which is 8.2, over adjacent, which is 4. And again, I want to find out what angle H is, so I have to use inverse tangent. So I'm going to say the tangent inverse of 8.2 divided by 4. Put that in your calculator, and you're going to get H is about 64 degrees. It said round to the nearest tenth. For angles, I find it easier just to round to the nearest whole number. So angle H is 64 degrees. If H is 64, then to find angle F, just like we found angle C before, it would be 90 minus 64. Well, 90 minus 64 is going to be 26 degrees. So angle F will be 26. You don't have to use inverse tangent or sine or cosine, an inverse trig function, once you already know one angle. So you can go ahead and try letters C and D. Letter C is a lot like letter A, and letter D is a lot like letter B in that sometimes you're using Pythagorean theorem. Just be careful in letter D. Actually, let me just go ahead and do letter D. So in letter D, they told you that 36 is the hypotenuse. This is your hypotenuse. So to find XW, that would either be your A or your B. So I can say A squared plus 31 squared equals 36 squared. Remember, we would have to subtract 31 squared from both sides. 36 squared minus 31 squared is 335. So A squared equals 335. And I have to square root both sides. So A is roughly 18.3, which is the same thing as XW. Remember, I called it A, but we should call it 18.3. So now I know all three sides. I just got to find an angle next, either X or Y, doesn't matter, I'll find X. Well, I want to still use the two sides I know. I know 36 is hypotenuse, 31 is opposite. Opposite and hypotenuse is going to be sine. So I'm going to say the sine of angle X is equal to 31 over 36. I need to find out what x is. So I'm going to say the sine inverse of 31 over 36 equals angle x. And I can pop that now into my calculator. So shift sine 31 divided by 36, and I get 59.4. Again, I said just round to the nearest whole for angles. So angle x would be 59 degrees. So angle y would be 90 minus 59. Because remember, your two smaller angles have to add to 90. So angle y would be 31 degrees.